everyone, and welcome back to Thriving with AI. I'm Maria Matarelli here with Alistair Cockburn and Alisa Lorello. We are here talking about AI, the latest advancements, happenings, things in the industry. And Alistair, you were recently a guest speaker in Alisa's latest AI course she's been teaching. Can you give us a few highlights from that?
Yep. Now, first of all, we have to, Alisa tipped me off as to why she did this because she's teaching an enrichment class for high school students on AI. And I go, oh my God, how do you do that? Like, how do you? So I was peppering her with questions, and she told me later, she said, just come teach and you'll find out for yourself. So she said, all
Empirical
right,
evidence.
live it. And then you don't have to ask the questions. So, of course, then I went. And what I did was, because anything you say to a high school kid about AI, right? So, first of all, most of it's lost, right? Because of high school kids. And the second thing is, most of it's lost because AI is going to change so much. So, what can I say that'll do them anything good more than just type this into the browser, right? So, I picked three memes that I had run across, and I went online and actually used AI to generate one of the pictures that I couldn't find a good one online. Otherwise, I found ones online. And so I propose I'm going to show you the three memes that if any of them stick with any of the kids, I think it will do them good. So
I
here we
love
go.
this. You're speaking their language, the modern day language of me.
Tempting. Now, Alisa, you will have to tell us if anybody made any comment about this, like afterwards. Did you teach this last Monday also? Did you go and teach your course this last
We
Monday?
did. We did not have that exact course on Monday, but I have seen the students since. So
All right. So any possible
yes,
feedback?
I'll give you the feedback.
So, and I know Maria was intrigued by this one, so I'm going to start with this one, and I have to share my screen. So if I share my screen, I'm going to just share this one window, I think, that I don't have to. Is that okay for you guys?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
this is the image. I must know more, Alistair. What is,
Yeah.
please
Okay.
tell us
So
about
yeah,
this.
and a bit the problem is that Zoom throws up all kind of stuff all over my screen, so I can't see what's going on. But there we go. So the story goes like this. Back in the 90s, I was studying how to write software. And so I learned object-oriented design and this and this and this and that for that. And I remember this very clearly. Like I pick a number like 92, 3, 4, that kind of time frame. And I'm at IBM and I go into this thing and I'm talking about how to do responsibility-driven design and design your objects like this. And the guy who got up after me said, Alistair described very nicely how to paint a Fabergé egg with a fine tipped brush. But my problem is I have to throw as much paint on the wall as I can. Now, by the way, I'm supposed to say paint and not pain. It says throwing paint on a wall. It is supposed to be saying throwing paint on a wall, but same, right? So that always stuck with me because I'm studying how to write code. And this guy says, like, I have to produce 2 million lines of code. I don't need to know that you like the curly braces like this and the linguistics like that. I have to produce 2 million lines of code. So that was in the mid 90s, and that has just like always stayed with me, right? It's a little reality check. So then I was looking at AI, and what you see people doing is AI literally throws paint on the wall for you. So what I had them do with the students and also the adults, I said, name a time and a place where you had to be concerned with every detail. And you were equivalently painting an egg with a very fine brush. Okay. And so people were trying to do that. And then later, okay, and now name any time when the quality wasn't what you were after. You just had to cover as much space as you can. And then the thing that was interesting was one of the guys says something about using AI. And the insight I got from that little conversation was he uses AI to throw paint on the wall, but his prompt, he has to get very exact. So literally, if you see what people are doing with their prompts these days, they are painting, right? They'll argue over what kind of language you use in your prompt, and you shift your prompt and you get different answers. And should you have a sheet over here with all the meta instructions and stuff like that? So it's still the case that in all my writings, I'm teaching people how to write the perfect use case, perfect user story, good object-oriented design, good architecture. I'm still painting the egg. But AI, people who use the vibe coding, is just throw the paint on the wall, right? Give me, I don't care. Give me a thing. Like that picture came from ChatGPT because I couldn't find a good picture online. So I said, give me a picture of somebody throwing paint on the wall, right? And I don't care. I don't care. I threw paint on the wall. I let it throw paint on the wall. And I didn't even care about the prompt. So that's that one. Okay, we'll just stay with that one for a minute. We'll do them all separately so we don't get the conversations muddled. So, Maria, any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I really like this because you're kind of talking about like divergent versus convergent thinking in a way, right?
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if we're looking at going broad and then narrowing down, how are we approaching a task? How are we approaching brainstorming versus refinement of what it is that we're trying to do? And I think that a lot of times, having that more broad stroke can
Yeah.
help us in getting started, and then the refinement is narrowing down where we want to go. And a lot of, again, with AI prompting, there's so much iteration in it, right? And so being agile in the way that we go through and refine these prompts, and also refine the focus of what we're trying to create, because it's not just the one and done, one prompt and then you get the answer. It's looking at, okay, well, what's next, and then what's next after that.
So if we stay with software just for a minute, um, this is prototyping, right? Vibe coding. You can get something to draft, show your customers in a heartbeat, which is way better than having a conversation like we used to do and say, what do you really want? And then trying to read their minds for what they didn't say. You literally put it in front of them. And that's when throwing paint on the wall is great. This is perfect. And then the question is, now you need to narrow it down for something that actually works in production at scale with security and da 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 da. And that's where the prompting gets weird because once things go off track, it's just so hard to bring them back on track again. Alisa,
So actually, just
because you've been through this, so you've had time to actually reflect on it, maybe.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, well, the funny thing is, I just want to also share too, Maria. One of the students, their responses was that like doing their homework assignment was like painting the egg, but then like cleaning their room and shoving stuff under their bed was like throwing paint up against the wall.
Perfect.
There it is right there.
Perfect.
Like it's clean. The room's clean. It's may all be shoved under the bed, but like the room's clean. So
Who hasn't done that? Who hasn't done that?
It's minimum viable, really.
Minimum viable, I don't care.
exactly.
We need an acronym, minimum viable, I don't care. So anyway, yeah, so that was, I said, it's a way to think about it, about AI, right? So I like that one. And then there's the question, the painting the egg, is that in the prompt? Is that in the tuning the result of something fine? And there have been so many stories now about people who get what they need through the paint on the wall method. And there's a guy, he's the CTO or something of some new startup company, and he built a CRM, custom CRM for himself over the weekend, vibe coding. I mean, he knows what he wants, but he was able to steer it and built himself a new custom. He said all the other ones, too expensive, too slow, too many fields, too much babysitting. I wanted to support my fields and my workflow and my, right? And I've always suffered with CRM. So now I know maybe I could just go custom code me a CRM. And I spent a bit of time with Nick Cementa. Both of you know Nick recently. He bought a church. He bought a church.
Saw
His
that,
new
yeah.
his new office is a church. He's got lots of rooms in there. And a couple of his guys, he says, I have all my sales dashboards and meters and everything have been vibe coded over the last week by two of my guys. And he has them in competition with each other. One sees what the other one's doing. They go "Drrrr," like that. So the where he and I got to in the conversation is you I have a sentence here that the people who are experts in the previous technology are not the people who are going to be masters of the new technology. There are people for whom this AI vibe coding, throw the paint on the wall and wiggle and shake it till something good comes. They're different people and they have a different thought pattern. Like I can't do that stuff, right? But what it means is that probably not onesies, but 2 to 6 people will totally disrupt everything. And so Nick's comment was, You still need the chief marketing officer, chief sales officer, chief product officer, chief financial officer. Those people have to know what they're doing, but they don't need an army of typists anymore, which will get us to the point of now anybody can generate any amount of code at any speed. Who are the people who are going to be able to choose what the customer's actually going to want to buy out of it? And now you need some pretty deep insights into that little back and forth there. We're in the feedback game. Remember, I brought up a couple of sessions ago is great. We can produce anything, and how do we get the feedback? So we're going to see that. But anyway, so that was the net out of the throw the paint on the wall is this new thought to me is that if you had a company with 5 people, all experts in their specialties, and I've met some startups like that, they can vibe code their way through most of what they're going to need like that. So and then the bigger companies can't keep up. They can't do that. But it's like agile, but agile with rocket ships, right?
Right, right. Yeah, because being able to be fast and being able to be nimble, that's going to get somewhere, as we know, something to market sooner will give us more information, more feedback, and we can make better decisions as we iterate and improve.
Yeah, yeah. So it's going to be really interesting. But so sort of the new thought out of that whole conversation was the idea of a company with just the CXOs plus vibe coding. That's it. And maybe they have one extra helper each, but then they're kind of done. Did you have more thoughts about the whole egg versus I can't believe it says pain on the wall. I mean, like there's a Freudian slip in there
You know,
somewhere.
I feel like I was actually just thinking, it feels like there's a deep learning there, right?
Every time I'm talking about that, I look at that and I go, ow, so my subconscious was
Well,
actually going.
I love that you said every time I look at that instead of I added a T, right? Like, and so, but if you're throwing paint on a wall, there's something there about releasing, letting go, right? Moving on, I feel.
All right.
well, the
So
other thing too is you keep saying a wall, but technically that's a garage door, and it says pane. So I'd be curious what your prompt was.
wait.
Here's the T. We're
There's a
adding the
T word.
T.
There you go.
Woo! There we
There we
go.
go.
That's
Hey,
awesome.
I
Perfect.
just vibe
Perfect.
coded it. I just vibe coded it. Good enough.
Amazing.
All right. Are we done with that one?
Yes.
Anybody got a comment? I'll go to the second one. So the point was, we don't know where this is going, and I wanted to implant that in their mind, right? That whatever they see about AI today is not. And so I hunted up the top left is an early steam engine, and the top right is an early combustion engine. And I want to compare that with the riding lawnmower on the left and the weed whacker on the right. They're both internal combustion engines. So if you had gone back to the early steam locomotive and said people will be riding these little things around, or they will literally be holding it in their hand and taking out weeds. This is not even imaginable, right? To the people in the late 1800s, 1880, we're talking about some number like that. Not even conceivable, right? And AI is already almost there. Like it's already almost 2 years from now in your eyeglasses, in everybody's eyeglasses, their watches, their chains. It will be like in every device, and you will not be able to hide. And to try to predict 20 years, 10 years out, by the time these kids, let's say they're 17 now, roll forward 20 years, they're 37, they're, tech leads, even 15 years. 32 years old, they're tech leads. What's AI going to be 15 years from now? Nobody has a clue, but it'll be more than that shift from the steam engine to the weed whacker. So that was the second meme. Do you have any thoughts on that, either of you?
I think that's a really good point because, looking at history gives us a glimpse of what we might see repeating in the future, right? And so
Yeah.
it's a reference point. And what we see today, I mean, even now, if you look at AI technology and the different platforms that exist, and then you fast forward a couple months, it's still revolutionary. There are completely new platforms coming out regularly. And in all of my conversations, as I'm leading training classes for different companies, I'm asking people this question every single week. I'm saying, what is your impression and experience with AI? And the answers they're across the map. And so I think you're right. Alistair, when you say like it's still early, because we don't really know what it's going to look like. And I think that you're right that it's going to be something that we may not even be able to fully imagine yet today.
We even asked the kids in the class what they thought the future potentially could look like, right? I mean, for some of us, it's like, oh, the Jetsons, or we have like movies or things to kind of reference that show the future state. But even the kids were kind of like not clear on what the future state really could evolve to based on this discussion. So it is
The
without a
thing
crystal
is,
ball, how could we possibly really know?
the thing that I get, it's going to be pervasive and interconnected. And the people who are using it, the people who've got it in their glasses and just walking around with it, talking to them all the time, are going to be so much faster than everybody else because they'll be looking at things and they'll just ask a question or make a thought and they'll hear it in the answer, right? And then the people who they're talking to can't keep up with them. If we just go language translation is the simplest thing, right? I go to Brazil. I don't speak Portuguese, and I'm a bit of a Luddite. I don't have any of the real-time translating thingies, on me. But let's say I go with a buddy who's got that, and then that person is quasi speaking Portuguese with people, and I'm still not, right? Or China or Japan, just as a simplest example. But having the entire, not only encyclopedia, Wikipedia, kind of in your ear with translators, but also having advisors and looking things up and making suggestions and what to say and no, 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 no. So I see, the has nots gap,
Yeah.
right? That's going to be accelerated with the people who are early adopters and wearing wearables.
Well, something I think too with the wearables, it's not just language translation in some cases too. It's actually picking up like slang or mannerisms or different types of nuances that isn't just straight language. For instance, my brother worked for was it TRL in Germany, and he was a translator with the executive. So he went and would help them translate American shows to make them German shows. And for instance, one of the shows I think was like The Nanny. That show is based off of kind of like the humor of her in the New York accent, and it has different kind of cultural nuances that isn't just, you can't just translate that with a language, just replacing it with a German language. So,
Right.
right. So there's a lot of that I think that the wearables and the devices will also probably have to pattern recognition as well and help with some of that translation. Like when you're doing business in Japan or other cultures, well, they'll just say like, "Oh yes," and you think, "Oh, they're in agreement with me." Because I remember I had to do cultural classes, business classes like that, and you learn that that's cultural wise, they're just being respectful. That doesn't mean they're agreeing with you and they're going to buy your product.
And I know two people who've just recently published books who are not writers and they're full of things they want to say, but they're not going to sit and hand type. I'm doing painting the egg. When I write a book, I'm typing every single letter by myself. I decide what every word is, right? And these people have ideas and they could never have an outlet. And now a couple of them have really kind of cool books because it's showing what they're thinking and they would guide it, right? But the content is theirs and the word help is the AI. So yeah, there we go. You ready for the third one?
Yeah, let's go. This is a really good example of the engines. I like this one.
Good. Glad you like it. And this one was, I brought it up last time. The one pattern that's kind of shaping up for now is this agent herding thing. So I found both of these on the internet. I didn't have to use ChatGPT to generate it. A lot of people have these with the agent herding or wrangling. I like wrangling because wrangling implies they aren't, herding implies they more or less are stay together, and wrangling is not. And again, for the high school students, I proposed that agents right now are a bit like high school students in being a little bit unreliable. And I said, if you have a project that's important to you and you've got 12 high school students, how do you organize it knowing some people won't show up, some will be lazy, some will be good, they'll be making mistakes, da, 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 da. Well, you'd have some sort of way of having them check on each other. So I've been watching, the posts on LinkedIn and places, and a lot of the people, the one I talked about last time, everything was supposed to be perfect. They had a log, they broke up the tasks, everybody took a task, all the agents did. But what I'm not didn't see there, and I'm watching for, so it's like what I'm thinking about is having agents check on agents' work. So let's stay with software, and one of them produces a thing, and the other one takes the same spec but produces the tests and then breaks it. But you need now and then flags the tests that fail. But you want a third one that arbitrates which one of those two was ever correct.
Oh, nice.
So having little trios like that, right? Someone who's a generator, someone's a checker, and someone that's an arbiter. They're having trios of agents going around just to try to reduce that error space. I don't know if it works, but when I say agent herding with error-prone technology, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. Now, it may just be that agents will get good enough that you don't have to do that, but it's a way of thinking about having just bunches of agents go out and doing things.
When it provides an extra layer there of just validation, whereas, a lot of the guidance that we're seeing online is we still do need that human interaction, right? The human review, human confirmation. And so, do you still envision there'd still be a human overlooking all of that? Or what are your thoughts?
There's a program called Ralph that's been making the rounds, and the guy said, I just set it up and I go to sleep, and I let Ralph, do whatever in the morning. Um, so there will be some of that Ralph thing happening, but I'm also seeing more notes online that say be really careful what you ask for because it'll probably give it to you. And so now we're back to painting the egg. Think very carefully what you're asking for because however you phrase it will, right? So now we're back to the customer reviews, customer interviews, and as someone said, how you need someone who will check that people really want to pickle wrapped in ham before you go make products of, and market, get a brilliant marketing campaign for pickles wrapped in ham. Somebody with this thing needs to figure out if actually anybody's going to buy pickles wrapped with ham, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's what I got. So that's all I got. Well, I have lots more on other things, but
I
those are
like it. Alistair, I love your meme game is strong. Yeah, your memes
well,
are
the
very
pictures made
good.
a lot. I had the memes, I had the phrases, but the pictures helped so much.
Yeah.
Did you want to talk about the activity? Tic-tac-toe?
So this was interesting, yeah. So that was like half an hour. So I made sure half an hour left for the actually interacting with it. So I said, okay, what I want you to do is like open up chat. And the one hard thing that actually you'll get stuck on is you have to create a plain text file and you will have to copy paste from whatever chat gives you into the plain text file to run it. It'll be a Python program. And out of the, let's say, I think there were like 6 groups, including adults. 5 of them never got the text file open.
Really?
So only one group, only the one pair who actually had been using more chat were able to literally create a .txt file or .html file that had plain text in it. Everybody else couldn't somehow do it. We got stopped on that. So that was interesting. And then this one couple, this young man, young woman. And so I said, just have it do any tic-tac-toe, make sure you get a tic-tac-toe, make thing, and then change the rules and make it interesting. And this couple, what they did was, in Hangman, you have to get all the letters,
Yep.
right? So they made an 8x8 tic-tac-toe board and you had to spell potato. And so you put in potatoes of different colors, and whenever you got 1 or 2 in a row, it would start spelling POTA, right? And the goal is to get all 8. And they got that by vibe coding. And they did that inside the half hour.
All right. There we
That's
go.
it.
So as a follow-up, some of the other students continued to run that exercise and did successfully accomplish that and had some really fun
Oh,
things that
did
they
they?
played
Oh
with.
yeah, the
Yeah, they
other thing is
did.
that turned out to be a little bit addictive and people went home and kept playing with it. And once you
Yeah.
get started, once you get it working, you start playing. Well, I wanted to, it's like I showed them because what I did was I wanted Putin versus Zelensky. So I had a 5x5. You have to have 4 in a row, Putin versus the Zelensky. Go get, caricatures of the two of them and make sounds when you put them in. Right. So I got chat to do that for me. And then people go, oh yeah, but you can also do this. And then they are playing all night. So it's got this lovely little addictive behavior. Vibe coding, I think, is going to be addictive like many other things.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Alistair. Appreciate you sharing those. Love the meme game. Very good. Well, Elisa, do you want to jump next to one of our topics here, talking about security and privacy and information collection?
Yeah, so the last time when we had talked, when you had shared out the Instacart article and kind of the insight to what was taking place with that, I actually had received a lot of feedback on that, and there was a lot of concerns about that, and a lot of folks were really disturbed that that was occurring, and that they could track those patterns, and like you said, what does that lead to, as far as security? So then in kind of looking at that and realizing how can you protect your security, how can you protect your privacy, a lot of the guidance for that, in which I'll read it, and then the interesting thing is, how realistic is it to apply some of that? So no face recognition with apps, no public profiles, limit data sharing, don't use free apps because that will cost you privacy. And then avoid linking health, voice, and location apps or devices. And then you really having to scrutinize your terms and conditions, as well as going in and updating some of your settings, right, with your devices, and also with your privacy privileges on some of the apps. But so like reading some of that, just that's the short list, right? There's obviously a lot more guidance into securing your privacy, but the reality is, how realistic is that today, in our everyday and how we're operating? Um,
Well,
I mean,
a lot of what you're talking about here, Lisa, like we're already in too deep. Like,
right?
how are we going to not do those things when so many of us are already integrated with the free apps, with sharing information, sharing locations, all of those things? I think it'd take a lot to back away from it.
Yeah. I mean, realistic, majority of our entertainment, I mean, just in our everyday usage of our technology, it's just natural to do a lot of that, right? So how it's too late to get off the radar to not be, have our data being collected and being pulled into and shared, and having some of this potential malicious usage, and so it's very kind of interesting. Um, yeah, I'd be fascinated to see how we could get better at securing that, because obviously some of these, things that we need to do that just aren't realistic. Like you said, we're just too far in it, right?
Yeah, because it's also the convenience of it, right?
Yeah.
The sheer convenience of all these apps and then the habit as well. So you've got the habits that are already formed around it as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
especially face recognition. I mean, like, how many of us, like, most every app, right? It's so much easier to, put the phone in your face and, um,
Actually, I've resisted that one. I haven't done that one yet.
really?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
wow. All right. Look at
yeah.
you. Well, not even just that, but like I was talking about, you can change your password, but once it has your facial recognition, you can't change your face.
Yep. That's it. And there's already stories of, people taking a phone, pointing at somebody, opening the phone because they pointed at their face. Just like in the movies where they knock someone out and stick the thumb on the, on the fingerprint reader. Spooky
Right.
stuff.
So I think that's an interesting, like, I think that's something I'm gonna really kind of want to follow now, is to try and see how can we really protect our privacy, and gain that kind of security, just in other means, because realistically, like you said, Maria, we're too far deep. How can we continue to do that?
It
I
would
mean, even
take,
looking at
yeah.
devices like Fitbits and Apple Watches and Aura Rings, and I was like, we're talking about in the future, you're going to have glasses now. I mean, we already have those, like the Ray Bans and from Meta, and we're just going to have more and more of that stuff, and that's just becoming a part of our culture, and especially talk about the younger generations, right? They want that stuff, oh, I gotta go get the coolest, neatest gadget out there, so it's going to be fascinating to see how that evolves.
Yeah, because it's almost so integrated into how we even communicate right now. If
Yeah.
you're in certain apps and then accepting terms of service in order to use the apps and then the different features, and like it's so far ingrained. I'm just imagining how would one back out slowly of that, right? It would
Yeah.
be incredibly inconvenient to not have your devices connected, to
Yeah.
not be able to have things seamlessly sharing, to not say accept so you can share a photo, right?
Yep.
And so it really is such an intricate design in how everything has been set up in the way that we engage with technology today.
Yeah, I have to say this stuff spooks me so bad. I'm being really quiet over here. It's like I just
I was
go,
gonna say you're abnormally quiet.
no, I go black inside because I really don't like. So on the one hand, as you've said, we've got wonderful prosthetics for people who need it. And on the same side, we've got things like the translation and all those good things. And on the other side, there's zero privacy. And once it goes in there, everybody knows more about you than you know about yourself. And and that slippery slide is all greased and we're sliding down. And I just go, I kind of don't want to talk about it.
So
Well,
the
I'm glad
question,
you talk
it
about
really
it, but
is.
that's why I'm being quiet.
right? Well,
No,
like,
and it's. Oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say it truly is the danger, right? When it knows more about you than you know probably yourself, right? And actually, interestingly enough, I did do that as an exercise. I asked ChatGPT, "What do you know about me?" And interestingly enough, right, it took all of the searches, anything that I've ever looked up or asked about or anything, and it gave me this full summary about what it knew about myself. So it was just kind of interesting, and then I'm kind of learning to understand what it thinks about me, right? And then realizing some of it wasn't accurate because if I was looking something up for someone else or certain things, it was kind of pulling that information in. But then again, this is back to where we have to be very careful with what we share. And actually, the next class I have with the students is on that security about sharing information. Again, facial recognition, photos. I mean, at that point, it's all open source. I mean, even some people are, I've talked to some people and they're like, oh, yeah, I've put my medical records to have ChatGPT summarize it and give me some, summaries. And you're kind of like, oh, that's great. What did it tell you? It was really helpful. Oh, that's great. But then at the same time, you're like, now it's got all of your data.
Back to the data. It
Right.
always goes back to the data, right?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about that quote before. Like, if you're not paying for the product, you are the
Or the
product,
product.
right?
Right. Well, so my mind goes to how much efficiency can we gain in the short term leveraging these technologies, before it takes all of our data and then we all just, are in like a little tube, little test tube for a human and everything's, you know, through the mind and the however like in the actual matrix system, right? What is it that we can benefit? How can we leverage the benefits of the technology? Can that outrun the risks or concerns, right?
Well, again, to the example of the person who put their medical records in there, right? They came back with some diagnosis that actually helped them, that led to them going and getting other tests and making some requests with their physician. So, right, there's kind of a benefit to that for them, but again, like at what risk or what cost, with that full exposure. So do we just get to that point where we just have that full exposure and we have to accept that? Or, is there the ability or way to kind of, protect some of that? And I guess, do we get the choice to determine what we want to protect as far as what is shared and isn't shared? So I mean, kind of like back to the Instagram, right? They're doing pattern recognition, right? They're not technically saying they're collecting the person's data, but you can tell a lot just by pattern recognition, right? What if you're buying all organic or if you're buying all, particular types of foods or cultural type of foods. I mean, those are patterns, right? That can make bias recognitions on biases. So
Oh my goodness, you just brought up bias. Have you two been reading any of the sort of the bias reports? Like you go to Africa, where most people are black, and it's a different culture and a different cultural history and a different everything. And then ChatGPT is so built off of Western white culture and writings, and then they try to apply it to people in Africa, and it just doesn't make any sense because it's all been educated in this domain and not in this domain.
I haven't
well,
seen.
that's where it has to be
You haven't
trained
seen
on
that?
data,
I
right?
haven't.
Oh
That's
man,
no, I haven't seen it either.
oh man, if I run across it, I'll grab the links for next time because it periodically pops up. But there's one lady in particular who has been working in Africa, in African cultures with the AI, and it's just seeing this incredible, I can't even say mismatch. It's just like shooting off in the wrong direction because it's trained in on predominantly white European literature, memes, everything, and
Right.
doesn't make any sense. And I would imagine Western to Chinese, Western to India, but Western to African was the one. So there's a whole topic there where we think about, will there be a version trained upon some other culture like African or Indian or Chinese or Japanese,
Yeah, and
or this mismatch going to keep going? What?
and it all goes back to how are we training the AI? What's the data
Mhm.
inputs? What's the data integrity? Is
Correct.
there
Exactly.
diversity? All of that comes up there.
Correct. Yeah.
Well, and over time, if there is usage, right, it would continue to aggregate that, so it would kind of feed into that. So it should open that knowledge base. Because again, right, data is the bloodline of
Yep.
AI. So
Yep.
it's
Yep.
what it's fed is what it's you're going to get return.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. If I see
Yeah,
that
I'd be
on my
interested in
next
reading that.
series, I'll bookmark and send to you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Alistair. And this kind of leads us into our next topic. You were talking about AI will become a commodity, not a competitive advantage.
So I've been listening to this. So again, these are lines I'm just, doing my ordinary surfing, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever that may be. Here's the sentence. It's so easy, and I like this phrase. There's something wrong with it and something right with it. That's what I love about this phrase. It's so easy that there's little justification for getting breathlessly excited about a function that will be in everybody's hands instantly for a few cents. And here we all get, oh, it's AI, oh, it's AI. This person's like, like 5 years from now, it'll be like the internet. Like we got excited about the internet. Uh, right? Now, of course, it's internet. It's like water, right? So AI, we're all excited about it, but in a couple of years, it'll be like water, right?
Right.
Then the next thing, and then my problem with it is because you've got the haves and the have-nots, and that divide is going to magnify so hard. Then the next sentence is real value in the world will still be delivered by human ingenuity. And so we're back to, you need the CMO, chief marketing officer, chief product. You need the people who can figure out what actually fits into the world are still needed. And they have to do the judgment about what other people will do using, of course, AI as a tool, but you need that human there. And then the next sentence is the people who have that ingenuity are not the people who had it with the previous technology. So we're going to see, it has happened with every turn of technology, right? Whether it was the car, whether it was computers, whether it was the internet, whether it was mobile, whether it was whatever, the people who thrive with it are the people that it fits with their brains, and the people who are thriving with the previous technology, it doesn't fit their brain the same. So we're going to see, and let's take artists just for a minute. I look at these AI generated movies. Some of them are brilliant. They're fabulous. They're beautiful. They're artistic. They're sweet. They're innovative, right? And it's one person with an idea that would never do paintbrush on canvas or
Right.
chisel or clay, right? But their mind works so they can see a way to make this thing do some magic, and it's magic. They're artists, and it's art. So that's that quote there.
That's so interesting you said that. I was watching a podcast, and the CEO was talking about how it's soon to be retiring, and that he realized is that um, when he retires, the CEOs to follow him, he'll be the last CEO of his company to just manage all humans, and that the following CEO that takes over from him will end up managing humans and AI, and just talking about how different that essentially could shape and shift the industry and the organizational structures, and that's really going to create some changes in operation, but there still have to be humans, right? I mean, you can't not. But I
Yeah.
think to your
Yeah.
point that it'll be interesting to see that you will have to have like the program managers or the product managers still at that level, stitching the projects together and then also ensuring.
Giving a direction, someone has to pick the
Yeah.
direction, right? And I want to bring up, you brought up executives, and I saw a note. I get a lot of stuff. I browse. LinkedIn's really good for just seeing people from all different job roles and what they're just saying. This was an executive coach who is saying that they're watching executives suffering now because the executives are trying to keep up with AI and their employees are trying to keep up with AI. So what the executive is doing isn't managing the people and their attitudes. They're having to manage the people and the attitudes and learn the AI and manage the other people's attitudes toward the AI, right? So the executives are under tremendous stress. They can't barely keep up with the old job. And the water level's like going up so fast, right? They're really struggling with all the new assignments that are showing up on their doorstep. So when you talk about the next CEO, will have to manage both. You're going to have the next layer of executives that are comfortable with working with agents. So that's going to be core competency from
Well,
now.
when you think about managing that too, how do you manage performance at that point? If you've got people managing the AI, and I think that creates a lot of shifts in that mentality of being a manager and being a leader. What does that look like in that new climate?
Yeah.
Well, and the assumption is that technology is going to be more accurate, faster, more systematic, doesn't need to take breaks, right? Things like that.
Mhm.
Though there's still the consideration for the human oversight, right? And so is it that the human that's overseeing the technology, that their job, part of that is now what's the reliability, what's the consistency, what's the
Yeah.
quality of the output of the AI, right?
Yeah. 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 And the companies that are public, the stockholders still want to see the profit margins going up, and that's not going to be handled by AI making those judgments. It will still be people making those judgments that will be evaluated on how well they judge the outcome such that the share prices went up through the use of all this throwing paint on the wall stuff.
I was just had a conversation with a friend who works for a small startup company, and that's what we were talking about. Like they're producing code and making all these changes like super fast, but the rest of the process hasn't caught up. So in some cases, you've got some areas that are just like, moving a million miles a minute, but then, there's other areas in the workflow that are becoming impediments or blocking,
Totally.
that actual process. And in the same way, I think essentially like even humans managing some of that, if we're sleeping and it's all still working and then you wake up, are we going to be able to catch up with that even when it comes to oversight and
Oh my God.
managing?
Oh my God. Here, I'm going to have to leave a little bit early.
Can we do one wrap up closing conversation?
Sure.
All
Happy
right.
to.
The final topic for today. This actually brings us to our next point. Should AI be the front line for customers, right? Are we losing the human insight? Are we able to pick up the nuances, the tone, frustration? Alisa, this is a little bit of a follow up from our last conversation last time. Any additional thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the concern, right? And I think I used the example of my friend who works in fintech, where it was like, someone goes on and just in the chat bot, do you guys sell giraffes? Just it's obviously something silly, right? But I think that really leads to that. Do you want your AI being your front line with your customers? I mean, I think you lose that human insight that if you actually had someone on there, right? And some of that back to where we were talking about language, there's tone, where a human speaking to someone can pick up if someone's getting frustrated or I had a friend of mine tell me that when she wants to get past the when you call the voice automation systems, she noticed recently, like if she starts shouting, she thinks that it bypasses her into actually just going and being able to talk to a human. So, is the technology have certain responses where it's just picking up certain levels of tones? Like, what is it in fact, or like, what are we gaining and losing from them being on that front line, right? And then feedback loops. Are we losing feedback loops by having AI there, and then the ability to pull that into metrics where we may not have the opportunity to look at innovation or potential opportunities for the company to expand into product markets or better improve their existing products. So I think there's a lot of risk for that because realistically, those tools and chatbots, it's support tools with like knowledge based articles it's running off of, trying to provide support or Q&A type of stuff, but it's not relationship building. So back to kind of that brand management, are we losing some of that?
That is such a good point, and there are many companies today where you can't even contact the company.
Oh my
And it is
Yeah.
one
goodness.
of the most frustrating, maddening experiences. Alisa, shall we share our closing thoughts from
Yeah.
today?
I think this kind of comes back to, our usage of AI, just the multiple conversations in, how it's ever changing and evolving our world. And I think kind of back to the meme that Alistair showed that was, the steam engine versus, then now having something that's gas driven and, in a lawn machine versus like, where is the future going to go? But in that, again, we have to be um, the watchers of that, right? We have to be the keepers of that, again, back to our privacy and safety and security. We kind of, it almost has to be self-governed because no one else is really kind of out there governing some of this and the usage of it. So I think we have to kind of self-govern, really to protect our own interests and our own needs and our data and our, secure the access to that. So I think that's definitely interesting. But kind of back to the loss of customer service too. I think, companies racing to that, that's great, maybe for internal processes to gain efficiency and save costs. But when it comes to customer service, are the customers ready? And what are we sacrificing to have the AI there, thinking that it's saving them, costs from having a human there. So I mean, we saw that even with offshore, call centers, right? When you had even foreign individuals, trying to get back to language barriers and nuances, and I think that when companies are looking at their bottom line, then they're concerned about loss of funds or money or things like that. That maybe they need to be reconsidering those frontline folks that are working directly with your customers.
Yeah, these are really, really great insights. And I really truly believe that the companies with the best customer service, they will win, right?
Yeah.
These days. If you look at Amazon, phenomenal customer service. And that's why they keep having so many satisfied customers that keep returning and spending more and more. And you look at the stores these days and such poor customer service often, not even having the products in stock, even when the website says that it is allegedly in stock. And when you keep having those mismatches in what you promise to what you deliver, or even just in a poor customer experience, like that is going to be why the companies that have that figured out are going to win, right?
So I think they got to balance that out too, right? Find a healthy balance between having the technology but still providing that level of customer service. And look, we're not always going to get it right. Some of this is so new, right? So some of it will be trial and error. But I think the biggest thing for companies is that if they do try and implement something like that and it's not working, recognizing that, and then reassuring your customer base that, hey, we tried this isn't working. We're gonna make right on that, right? And I think that was, I think even Amazon had a class action lawsuit in regards to like their promise of certain spending, and then you get it the next day, but you wouldn't. And so there was a big class action lawsuit on that. But I think as long as the companies just say, hey, we tried, we're trying to do this, we're trying to provide better service, and if it doesn't necessarily work out, then they try and make that right. I think that's their best to preserve that brand.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Elisa, thank you for sharing your thoughts. I'm so enjoying these conversations. I think it's important to keep the conversation going around AI, continue our learning. Things are evolving, things are continuing to adapt. So the more that we can be on that cutting edge as technology continues to evolve and emerge, that's how we can find how does this work for us? What are the things that we can do to have this help amplify how we work rather than just getting kind of swept away by the current, so to speak. So this does wrap up another session here of Thriving with AI. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to continue to sharing these thoughts and different topics on what is happening here in the industry.